So something I really like to do with my athletes is having them work up to a heavy single. Now this isn't a max. This is just working up to something heavy, and then I ask them whether or not they think they can add another 10, 20 pounds to it. And if they're not sure, then that's your heavy single for the day. The reason why I include this in a lot of the programs, especially for beginners, since we don't really have maxes to work off of, and their maxes are constantly changing, um, so you can't really base it on percentages, is because of some work, and you'll have to forgive me if I butcher their last names. Jovanovic and Flanagan found that strength can vary as much as 36% per day. Like your velocity, your bar velocity, even, you'll see a 36% variance. Well, this isn't really all that surprising. I'm sure that we all can appreciate that you don't live in a bubble. And so, you have life stress, you had a bad night of sleep, you had a fight with your girlfriend, you got an unexpected bill in the mail, like any number of external stressors, mental, psychological stress, physical stress, maybe you are fighting some kind of cold that, your immune system's able to handle it, so you're not going to end up getting a cold, but, you're just feeling a little bit under the weather. You're not sick, but you just don't feel right. Your energy's low. Like I said, you had a bad night of sleep. Any number of things. You had a bad day at the office. All those factors come into play. We know this, especially looking at the NCAA. When do athletes get injured? Midterms and finals week. So obviously, psychological mental stress plays a role in our physical ability. And that's why I like to do just this heavy single thing. When I don't have athletes who are like if you have a really advanced athlete, you can pretty much guarantee that their max isn't going to be changing a whole lot over time. So in those situations, you can get away with using a more percentage-based program. But that's because there's at the point where they're not going to put a whole lot more weight on their squat or anything like that. For beginners and even intermediates, they'll certainly be changing their max over time, and so I don't like to use percentages with them. So what we'll do is we'll work up to something that feels heavy that day, and then we'll just base the rest of the workout off of that. So then we'll go to percentages. So let's say you work up to 315 in the back squat, and you say, I don't think I could hit 335. Okay, then 315 is your max for that day, and then we'll drop to 90% and do some singles, or maybe we'll drop to 80% of that and do doubles or triples. It's not a hard set percentage of your 1 rep max, your all-time 1 rep max. It's that day, and that's because you have that 36% variance. I could probably talk about this for a really long time and go into discussing all kinds of details about rate coding and stretch shortening cycles, and how things like dopamine and serotonin end up playing a role in your ability to recruit muscle fibers. That stuff is cool to learn about. It really won't change how you train, though. So the point that I'm trying to share with you guys, though, is to be cognizant and aware of the fact that your strength changes. So if you think you're doing a program that's 80%, on a bad day, that 80% might be 90% of what you would have been capable of that day. If you think about it, I have a 400-pound max, and so I'm going to train at 80%. So that'd be 320, and if you think about it logically, let's say that's a bad day, so your max that day actually would be 350 instead of 400, and that 320 is going to feel unbelievably heavy, versus another day where you're feeling great and you really could hit your max at 400. That 320 is going to feel much lighter, and that's just something I think people should be aware of, and not to be all woo and I don't know, emotional about it, but be nice to yourself. Don't get pissed off and angry whenever you are having a bad day. Just go with it. Be flexible. Yep, you're having a rough day, take some weight off the bar. It's not that big of a deal, and you kind of have to learn to train by feel a little bit. Um, I don't. It's not something that's really easy to teach people. They need to get some experience to really get an idea of how 80% should feel. So, if you put 80% on the bar and you're like, whoa, that feels way too heavy for 80%, you should probably strip some weight off because, as I stated at the beginning, there's a 36% variance in your velocity and strength on any given day. So you could be on one of those days where you're 36% down, and obviously you should adjust the weight accordingly. And that's why I like bar velocity. I think bar velocity is a great way to train. So like if you know that at 80%, your bar velocity is 1.6 meters per second or 1.4 meters per second, then every day when you come in, choose a weight that you're moving at 1.4, 1.6 meters per second. And of course, it's going to change for the lift. Like the bar velocity for a snatch is going to be different than your bar velocity for a deadlift versus your bar velocity for a squat. So you'll have to gain some data there, and use that. And of course, if you're a very experienced coach, and you've been working with an athlete for a long time, a lot of times you can just look at them and tell that they're moving slow. If I see somebody squatting and they're supposed to be at 80% and they're grinding their reps, instead of their usual fast up and down, well, I know that that's too heavy for them that day. I'll have them strip weight off. Versus some athletes, I mean, they look like they're grinding even when it's 70%. They're just slow. They might be super strong. They're just not really explosive and quick. It's just how their body functions. And of course, then you have to keep a closer eye on them because their changes in speed are much more subtle. And that's the takeaway here. The takeaway is that you don't live in a bubble. External stressors will happen. Happens to all of us. And because of that, you need to be flexible and accept the fact that your strength will change from day to day.